He is locked in a cell with no windows, no belt, no shoelaces, no pen with which to write. The authorities who put him there are among the most experienced criminal investigators in the world, and he is still, without question, the most dangerous person in the building. Dr. Hannibal Lecter is widely considered one of the most psychologically complex villains in the history of cinema. Not because he is frightening, though he is. Not because he is violent, though he is that too. But because he is brilliant, cultured, genuinely fascinating to be around, and completely, irredeemably without conscience. He is a forensic psychiatrist who used his knowledge of the human mind to destroy human minds. A man who understands empathy with perfect clinical precision and feels none of it. And his most disturbing quality isn't what he does to people's bodies, it's what he does to their heads. Today we're going to find out exactly how he does it, and what it reveals about one of psychology's most unsettling questions. Can someone understand everything about human emotion without feeling any of it at all? To understand what Hannibal Lecter became, you need to understand what happened to him first. Thomas Harris's novels, the source material for the films, give Hannibal an origin story that is psychologically precise rather than dramatically convenient. Hannibal was born into Lithuanian aristocracy, brilliant from childhood, aesthetically gifted, emotionally contained in the way that sometimes marks exceptional intelligence in children. And then the war came. During the chaos of World War II, Hannibal witnesses the death of his younger sister Misha, in circumstances so traumatic and so violating that they rupture something fundamental in him that never fully heals. Psychologists who study extreme trauma in children identify a specific response pattern in a small subset of survivors, particularly those with high intelligence and a pre-existing tendency toward emotional detachment. Rather than breaking down, they build up. The psychological mechanism is called sublimation, a defense mechanism first identified by Freud, in which unacceptable impulses, including rage, grief, and violent urges, are redirected into socially acceptable or even celebrated activities. For most trauma survivors, sublimation looks like throwing yourself into work, into art, into exercise. For Hannibal Lecter, it looks like becoming one of the most respected psychiatrists in America, while channeling everything else into something conducted entirely in private. The result is a person of extraordinary internal coherence. His public self and his private self are not in conflict. They are perfectly integrated. Hannibal the psychiatrist and Hannibal the killer are not two different people. They are the same person operating in two different contexts. And that integration, that absence of internal conflict, is one of the most psychologically significant things about him. Most people who do terrible things experience guilt, shame, or cognitive dissonance. The gap between who they think they are and what they've done creates psychological pressure that eventually shows. Hannibal has no such gap. He knows exactly who he is, and he has absolutely no problem with it. In 1941, psychiatrist Hervey Cleckley published a landmark work called The Mask of Sanity. His central observation, drawn from years of clinical work with psychopathic patients, was that the most dangerous psychopaths are not the ones who appear obviously disturbed. They are the ones who appear completely normal, charming, intelligent, socially fluent, capable of performing every social ritual with perfect accuracy. Hannibal Lecter is Cleckley's thesis personified. Before his crimes were discovered, he was a celebrated psychiatrist with an elite clientele, a connoisseur of art and classical music, a gifted cook who hosted elaborate dinner parties for Baltimore's cultural elite. The people who attended those dinner parties had no idea what they were eating. This is the most important thing to understand about Hannibal's psychology and about high-functioning psychopathy more broadly. The mask isn't a performance that occasionally slips. For Hannibal, the mask is so thoroughly constructed and so perfectly maintained that it operates automatically. He doesn't have to consciously perform normalcy. He simply performs it. Psychologists who study this phenomenon describe it as the learned performance of social emotion. The psychopath learns over years and decades exactly what emotional responses are expected in which situations and produces them on cue. Not because they feel those emotions, but because they have studied them so carefully, often through a lifetime of observing normal people, that they can reproduce them without access to the underlying experience. Hannibal doesn't feel empathy, but he understands empathy with extraordinary precision. He can map your emotional landscape better than most therapists. He simply uses that map for navigation rather than connection. The psychological centerpiece of The Silence of the Lambs is the relationship between Hannibal Lecter and FBI trainee Clarice Starling. On the surface, it appears simple. The authorities need Hannibal's insight into another killer, and Clarice is sent to get it. But from the moment Hannibal and Clarice first speak, the dynamic is something entirely different. Hannibal reads Clarice in approximately 30 seconds. Not her name, not her file, not her stated reason for being there. Her shoes, her accent, the way she holds herself, the quality of her bag, the specific way she controls her expression when he studies her. Within moments, he has constructed a detailed and accurate psychological portrait. Working-class background, exceptional intelligence driven by something more than ambition, carrying a wound she hasn't fully acknowledged even to herself. Psychologists call this thin slicing, the ability to make accurate assessments from very limited information very quickly. Most people have some degree of this ability. Hannibal has it to a degree that researchers studying real psychopaths consistently identify as remarkable. The clinical observation precision that comes from a lifetime of studying people as objects rather than subjects. He doesn't see Clarice as a person. He sees her as a system to be understood. And understanding systems is what he does. The exchange Hannibal proposes, information about the killer Buffalo Bill in exchange for personal information about Clarice, is not a fair trade. And Hannibal knows it. Every piece of information Clarice gives him is not just data, it is a key. And Hannibal collects keys with extraordinary patience, building a complete map of her psychology that he can navigate at will. When he tells her in their early sessions that she will look for the thing that Bill covets and that it will be something personal, he is not guessing. He is reading the pattern of her responses, her hesitations, her word choices, and inferring what he already suspects to be true. The most extraordinary psychological moment in their relationship comes late in the film, when Hannibal calls Clarice from freedom, and the first thing he asks is whether the lambs have stopped screaming. He has been thinking about her, not as prey, not as a resource, as something closer to genuine interest. For Hannibal Lecter, a man who experiences most people as furniture, Clarice Starling represents the closest thing to a genuine psychological peer he has ever encountered. And what he does with that is one of the most disturbing things about him. He still uses her, just differently. Here is the psychological paradox at the heart of Hannibal Lecter. He is not empathy deficient in the conventional sense. He doesn't fail to understand other people's emotions. He understands them perfectly, better than most empathic people do. What he lacks is the resonance, the feeling of another person's experience inside yourself that creates genuine connection and ethical obligation. Researchers call this cognitive empathy without affective empathy. Cognitive empathy, the ability to understand what another person is feeling and why, is intact and extraordinarily developed in Hannibal. He can model your internal state with remarkable accuracy. Affective empathy, the ability to feel something in response to what another person feels, appears largely absent. The result is a person who can use emotional understanding as a precision instrument without being deflected by emotion themselves. This is why Hannibal's manipulation is so effective and so difficult to detect. When he identifies a wound in someone, as he does with Clarice, as he did with his patients, he doesn't probe it clumsily. He approaches it with surgical delicacy. He makes the person feel seen and understood in a way they rarely experience elsewhere. And that feeling of being genuinely seen, even by a predator, can create an attachment that overrides every rational warning signal. Psychologists studying parasocial manipulation identify this as the intimacy accelerant, the strategic deployment of genuine-seeming understanding to create a sense of connection far deeper and faster than normal social relationships would allow. Hannibal does not force his way into people's psychology. He is invited in because he offers something most people desperately want and rarely get, the experience of being fully known. He just doesn't tell them what he plans to do once he's inside. One of the most psychologically interesting aspects of Hannibal Lecter, and one that distinguishes him sharply from Anton Chigurh, our psychopath from last week, is that Hannibal has a personal code. He is not indiscriminate. He does not kill randomly. He has, by his own accounting, a philosophy. He kills the rude. This is not a trivial detail. It is the organizing principle of his entire double life. Hannibal operates according to a personal aesthetic, a worldview in which vulgarity, rudeness, and mediocrity are genuine moral offenses deserving of the most severe consequences. People who are intelligent, cultivated, and appreciative of beauty, he finds genuinely interesting. People who are crude, rude, or intellectually dull, he finds offensive in a way that, for him, carries fatal implications. Psychologists who study organized serial killers note that a personal code, however twisted, serves an important psychological function. It provides internal coherence. It allows the person to experience themselves not as chaotic or evil, but as principled, even righteous. Hannibal genuinely believes he is improving the world, not despite his actions, because of them. This is the psychological mechanism researchers call moral licensing by inversion. The belief that a personal moral framework, however disconnected from conventional morality, justifies actions that most people would consider monstrous. What makes this so unsettling isn't that it's irrational, it's that it's perfectly rational within its own framework. Hannibal is not delusional. He is not confused. He knows exactly what he is doing and exactly why. He simply doesn't share your values, and he has never felt the slightest obligation to. So what does the psychology of Hannibal Lecter actually tell us? It tells us something genuinely unsettling about the relationship between intelligence and conscience. Most of us assume that greater intelligence produces greater moral understanding, that the smarter someone is, the more clearly they see the consequences of their actions and the more compelled they are to act ethically. Hannibal Lecter is the counterargument. His intelligence doesn't produce conscience, it produces capability. The ability to understand everything about human suffering without being moved by it. The ability to read every person in the room without connecting to any of them. Intelligence, it turns out, is morally neutral. It amplifies whatever is already there. For most people, what's already there includes empathy, guilt, and a genuine experience of other people as real. For Hannibal, what was already there, damaged by trauma, shaped by a particular neurological reality, was something else entirely. There is a reason Hannibal Lecter endures as one of fiction's most compelling characters more than 30 years after The Silence of the Lambs. It isn't the violence. It isn't even the intelligence. It's the question he poses just by existing. What does it mean to understand everything about being human and feel none of it? And the deeply uncomfortable corollary, how would you know if the person across from you right now was doing exactly that? That's the legacy of Hannibal Lecter. Not the horror of what he does, but the impossibility of being certain he isn't sitting right next to you. Subscribe to Real Psychology. New psychological breakdowns every Monday and Thursday. I'll see you there.